what would you say is like the proudest, most memorable point of your career, aside of, these things that you've mentioned?
I mean, there's been a couple. I would say it's probably still getting to play Warp Tour,
Hmm.
and having like one one show in my kind of hometown of Toronto,
Hmm.
where just all my friends and family like came. Like it was just packed. It was a
Nice.
huge crowd, and that was still one of the coolest moments. And just hitting those little goals, you set
Yeah.
out to do, and
Yeah.
yeah, that was still one of the top. I've had so many, amazing moments like touring and, all that stuff, but it's just can't even count them all. But
How old were you when you played Warped for the first time?
it's 2015. Um, I can't remember. I have to do the math. I'm
Yeah.
not good at math. I'm 29 now, so what would that be?
uh,
Like 19,
it's
20 or something?
yeah, around that, around
Yeah,
that.
something like that. Yeah.
So, so what was that for you like? Like you're going there, you're probably seeing lots of the bands that you've been listening to for the first time, hanging out backstage, living this sort of experience. Do you have like specific memories from this day?
It was honestly, it was like insane to me, like at the time, coming from, just like such a small town, like where I grew
Mhm.
up, and just being around all those people. Like I didn't necessarily know how to navigate it in a way. So I think I
Yeah,
kept to myself a little bit, which I look back and I wish I had, gone out and,
yeah,
made more connections and friends. But it's just all was so amazing, man. Like, just the bus rides and hanging out with I was on the bus with Brian and all those YouTubers and stuff. And,
yeah.
just some of those special bus rides, driving all night, just sitting up and talking, like that kind of
Nice.
stuff. Just really loved it. So yeah, I probably drank a little too much through that to remember it all properly, but that's what it was at the time. So, but yeah, it was really cool, man. Really cool.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. Um, so, you know, um, obviously you've mentioned that back then you had different motivations to create music. You've mentioned that at this point it's more about self-expression and creating what you want to create, essentially, right? How would you say that this idea of creating music developed its intensity throughout the years? Like, do you still have the same passion to creating as back then? Is it more of a just thing that you're used to, so you're doing it, or why? I'm just interested to hear what's your emotional attachment to creating
Yeah.
music and how it progressed throughout the years.
Yeah, man. I would say now it's way less than it used to be, but I
Hmm.
think that's partially because, I mentioned like I'm just kind of turning into filmmaking, and that's also
Yeah.
something I've always wanted to do, and I did a little bit throughout the years and whatever, but I think it's just taking that energy and putting it into that now.
Hmm.
And you know, I guess, I don't know if you saw, but I decided to leave social media and just
Yeah.
like decided I just don't really want to tour anymore and
Yeah.
just kind of turn focus. And it was hard to do that, really hard to let go of all that stuff. But I feel good about it now. I feel peaceful about it. And I think it's made music a little more enjoyable because there's no attachment or hoping this gets successful or, it's
Hmm.
just, whereas I just didn't have that before, because I was working with people and always kind of felt like I had to make sure I was,
Yeah.
continuing on and carrying things. But so it's an interesting spot to be in. It's still new for me, but
Hmm.
I'm enjoying it so far because it's almost like, in a way, when you stop kind of being attached to something, nobody can take it from you in a way. Whereas before
Yes.
it's like, oh, if this doesn't do well, or what if my numbers go down? It's just like there's
Yeah.
none of that really anymore.
Yeah.
Obviously I'd still like to continue to maintain, the audience and all that stuff. But yeah, it's just interesting spot. So
Yeah, I was going to ask you about, your social media leaf and so on. Like, tell me more about it. Why? How did you take that decision?
yeah.
What was the lead up to that?
Yeah, man. Well, so I mean, social media has been a part of my life since I was started, it was like
Hmm.
kind of what started my career and like something I always enjoyed to maintain. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
really just scheduled with it and talking to people on there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just, over the years and just throughout my career and just personally, it kind of became more of like, and I think partially because it all changed so much, like social media itself,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
algorithms and just the way it all is,
Mm-hmm.
where it just kind of felt like you're just, throwing stuff at a brick wall in a way.
Yeah.
And, it just started to be where like nobody would see the stuff I post.
Mm-hmm.
I have an email list that I built up that was, always gets more engagement than my social media. So
Mm-hmm.
there's just a lot of things, and also just mental health, because it's, for me, it's different for everybody, but it's hard to just constantly be bombarded with stuff
Yes.
and just be scrolling for hours and then just being like, wait a minute, like I just wasted all this time, or like I started to think about these things.
Mm-hmm.
So I just made the decision that I just wanted to cut it out of my life because it's been a part of it, and just see, like, find myself outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
And also I think part of it is I always would just be like thinking like, what are people going to think of this picture, this post, and like
Yes.
living my whole thing. And that's just me, just anxiety and insecurities or whatever. But I was just like, I don't really know what it's like to live without this.
Mm-hmm.
So I did put out some songs to kind of see how they would do without me posting about them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was no different than, posting. So for me, I just was like, this just, it's, yeah. I mean, it was a lot of work building up all those followers and whatever, but I was kind of just like, what does this really mean to me now? Or
Mm-hmm.
what does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying everybody should do that, because it is important for
Mm-hmm.
growing stuff. But I guess I got to a point where I felt like I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's a lot of factors, but that was pretty much it. And I will say, like, it was probably the best decision I ever made. So like for myself, it's
Yeah.
really changed a lot. So yeah,
Honestly, I specifically wanted to ask you about that because recently I kind of did the same, because I found myself and you probably would understand me in the way that at some point you're able to think a bit more objectively and you see how this whole social media dynamic affects your thinking in way
yeah,
more ways than you imagine. And, the moment I stopped and distanced myself from it, it improved my mental health so much,
yeah,
It's just incredible what sort of difference can detachment from social media can do. Um, and from, you obviously mentioned the aspects that are related to your music and promoting, but I assume you experienced the positive effect from a personal perspective as well.
absolutely, yeah, man. Like I just noticed my mind is a lot different.
Hmm.
And I just feel happier, like
Yes.
without really having to do anything. And I think, looking at it too, at anytime I see those, because I still have YouTube, I use
Yeah.
that for a lot of things, but seeing those shorts that are just like TikTok dances or stuff like that, it's
Yeah.
just like, I know that's fun for some people, but I'm just like, I don't know, man. For me, it's just like, I just want to, it's given me more freedom to just focus on what I'm doing in the moment,
Exactly. Yeah.
and that's been probably the biggest thing. And, just not always worrying like, what are people commenting on this, or, what
Yeah.
DMs, like, so yeah, it's been pretty big. And I sometimes wish like more people would look at that as maybe a factor for how they're feeling, because I think it probably affects people in a way deeper way than everyone realizes. And as far as, business and all that stuff, I think, a lot of people just focus on micro content all the time. You got to do it this way. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think like that energy could also be used, because I think regardless of social media and how important that is to people, I think the art is still just as important. Like that didn't necessarily go away just because social media came in. So that's just my
Absolutely.
my perspective. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I perfectly agree with that, and I'm very happy to hear that you share the same mindset because you know I'm kind of in my in my friends groups I'm sort of preaching this method, and I'm preaching for people to leave social media because I think, as you've mentioned, it affects people on such a subconscious level that it literally affects your mindset, mentality, the way you perceive life, and all of that.
Hmm.
And it's incredibly, saddening for me to look at kids or adults or whatever that are spending literally hours just scrolling and watching reels or TikTok or whatever the case might be, while the level of comfort that you experience once you are detached to that and you sort of um, have the ability and the chance to just spend time with yourself and do what you want to do rather what is expected from you to do is like, it creates such a significant difference. And besides, I genuinely wish more people were thinking about the importance of art, as you've mentioned, because I don't know, it feels nowadays, and I'll be interested to hear your point of view as well, but it feels that like musicians and artists are sort of transferring to being content creators rather than people that create art, essentially. And you see people being famous for doing TikToks and reels or whatever rather than getting famous for songs and music. And
yeah, absolutely, man. And and I'm well aware like that's what works for some people, and some people, they're happy doing that. But for me, like I've just always been, I would rather just have a slow burn, just like a more longevity, more grounded. Whereas, a reel can get 3 million views, but then the next one gets 200 views, like and I know that, that kind of stuff has launched people's careers and helped, but for me, it's not worth the energy. And I have seen, friends and musicians start to focus so much on that, where it's just, you kind of lose the person in a way, and it's just like, I just never wanted to do that. I had people always telling me, oh, you got to get on TikTok, you got to do this. But I tried to make micro content, but I was just like, this is just so empty because I just don't have anything to say right now. So yeah, I agree with that. So.
Yeah. Empty is such a good word to describe that, it's encapsulated perfectly.